I will say at the start of this presentation, it's not my presentation. I'm a last-minute sub. My boss was supposed to be here, who's the Exec Director of Operations, to talk about how we went through the regulatory inspection. Now, I was involved in the inspection, so I can give quite a good insight into it. But if there's any really detailed questions, I might have to come back to you via email. So, before we start, just a little bit about us. We're not a massive organisation, 7.5, I think it's a bit more now, 1,000 properties based in the east of England. We do develop about over 200 homes a year, which is, the percentage-wise, is quite high. We have done for the last 6 or 7 years, and we continue to do so. Hence why our gradings have always been on the old IDA. We've always been G1 and we've been V2 because we developed quite a lot for our size. In the summer of last year, we were the 4th organisation, I believe, to go through the new regulation, the consumer standards. We came out, we're really happy with our result. We got the G1 and V2 will be maintained, and then we came out with a C1, which, if I'm completely honest, we weren't expecting going into that. We sort of knew our gaps, we knew our flaws. We weren't expecting to come out as a C1. We were pleasantly surprised. So I'll start off by talking about the preparation that we did. And when I said preparation for the assessment, it wasn't just preparation for the assessment. Over the last few years at our organisation, we'd had lots of changes from the top, the execs, the chief executive, my level. We'd all sort of come into the organisation over the last few years. So we'd been on a journey of sort of resident engagement, if you like. This slide is very heavy on the housing side, and I think what was really clear to us, and obviously my boss, who was supposed to be here, she looks after the asset side, the repairs side, but also the housing side. Consumer standards is all about both of them and how they work together and overlap. That's the biggest takeaway that we had from the consumer standards. So some of the changes that we'd made leading up to the inspection, which worked really well for us when we sat in front of the regulator, was we've done resident engagement massively over the last few years. Our residents have said to us they like to know who their neighbourhood officer is. We had patches working, we got rid of that a couple of years ago. That was a great lessons learned for us to share with the regulator, to say, we asked our residents what they wanted, this is what they wanted, therefore we did it, and our satisfaction went up because of that. Some of the other things that we've done, which I guess links massively to the ops teams and the asset repair, the management side of things, is there's something that's not right for us. So one of the questions that the regulator came in and asked us was that, how can you tell us that your homes are good quality and that you're not one of those landlords like we're seeing on TV? And the honest answer was, that we said to them, is we've got 100% stock condition data. We do it every 5 years. It's with our own in-house team. We've got the validation that we do externally every couple of years. But we're not going to stand here and tell you that all of our homes are good quality, because it'd be a lie. They're just simply not. And we know, and we're about to produce lists of houses where our properties weren't good quality. And that could be for a range of things. It could be no access. It could be the vulnerabilities of the resident that can't maintain their home. It could be damp and mould issues. What we are able to do, though, really clearly with the regulator is to say, we have a something is not right process. All of our frontline teams, whether they're in repairs, they're in contractors, they're all trained with something is not right. It's really, really simple. Our staff go to the site. It could be anything from the gardens not being maintained, there's a safeguarding issue, the residents really struggling to maintain their property, and it's really simple. They just email something is not right at Haybury, the address, what the problem is, and it goes into, we've got a specialist housing team that deal with all of that. We keep and we monitor a log of all those properties. So when the regulator came in and said, what were your properties, are they good quality? We were really honest, and we said, look, here's a list of properties that we know aren't good quality, and there's a whole host of reasons why that is, but this is how we identify them, this is how we work with the residents, this is how we deal with external agencies, and how our housing specialist housing team deal with us in repairs and maintenance, deal with the mental health teams, deal with social services to try and get those properties back to standard. And I think that really helped us from the point of view, we're really honest about where our gaps were. So on to stock condition, into the asset side of the business, which is more relevant to people in this room, I think. As I said, we have got 100% stock condition. We were really confident about that when we moved into the thing. Over the last few years, we were able to say to the regulator, this is how we improved. We changed our repairs and maintenance policies, probably like most people have done here, moved away from that blanket vulnerability ban. where we actually engage with our residents and we take it on a case-by-case basis, whether that resident is vulnerable, do we escalate that repair? For example, if a resident calls in and they're partially sighted and they've got a light out somewhere in their property, whereas before we might have said that was a 2-week job, it's not an emergency, because of the individual vulnerability of that resident, we would escalate that to emergency repair. Likewise, if a resident called in the summer months and said, I haven't got heating and hot water, and they've got a visual impairment, well, we wouldn't escalate that because it's not linked to their individual vulnerability. And we trained our frontline teams taking calls to be able to make those assessments with the resident and explain the reasons why. So there's some of the changes that we made to repairs. So in terms of the practical prep, it was actually quite difficult for us. And as I said earlier, we were the 4th, I think, organisation to go through this process. So there wasn't a standard list of documents that the regulator asked for. They gave us a list of documents in terms of what they might like to see, but it wasn't a standard list of this is what you need to supply us with. So what we fell back on, which I thought was really useful for us in PREP, was the self-assessment. So the year prior to the inspection, we'd done self-assessment against the regulator standards. That document, we spent an inaudible amount of time internally at director, exec level, preparing that document, sharing it with our committee, sharing it with our board. It went down into the nth degree of detail, where we could evidence board minutes, we could evidence leadership team minutes. We linked to it lists of properties that weren't compliant, how we were working with residents, different agencies. It was a huge document. That is what we used to prepare for our inspection. Now, distilling that down into like an actual piece of document that our teams could use in that interview process was really important. So we created storyboards. So from that, for instance, in my area, one of the compliance areas, we did a storyboard of what it compliance looked like 3 years ago, how we mapped that through, how it changed, and then down into the detail about fire risk assessments, for instance, how they changed our approach with regulation coming in. Now, why those storyboards were really important is because when the actual inspection came on site, previously I've been involved in IDAs, a number of organisations I worked for from an asset management point of view. It was quite simple. They ask you, what's your asset management strategy? What's your stock con data? Do you validate your stock con data? Yeah, then your business plan must be okay. The amount of information that they wanted to know about the ops side of the business was really high. So we estimated at the outturn when we did a reflection was the exec director of ops, my boss in business, 75% of the on-site regulated time was just with that one member of staff and she had to know the information talking about segmentation of our customers, their vulnerabilities, how we're supporting them through vulnerability, mental health issues, right the way through to sort of our area of business. What type of fire risk assessments do you undertake in your sheltered schemes? How do you monitor your fire actions? Where's your third-party assurance on your repairs? Where's your third-party assurance on all your compliance areas? So it was really useful for her, I think, to have those storyboards to hand, which detail out that key information. Now, the bits that they drilled onto in our area, and it will be different for other organisations, was repairs and fire risk actions. So they looked at all of our KPIs. We're not great, as I said. We try and do a good job, our policies, but we won't ever stand up and say we're 100% get it right with time. We had a lot of debate with the regulator about our repairs, because the first thing they asked for is, can we have a look at your WIP? We had a WIP of about 1,500 at the time. The regulator said to us, well, that's your backlog. And we had to argue to say, it's not a backlog, it's just the WIP. That's just what every organisation has. I just don't think they understood the terminology. Within that WIP, at that point in time, we had a couple of hundred repairs that were outside of policy target. Now, the regulator would rebalance that more so than any internal audit we've ever been involved in before. A list of every single repair address, why it was outstanding, what was the mitigation, and when it was going to get done. Now, we were really fortunate that we'd already done that piece of work. Something that our board and our committees asked for on a regular basis is any outstanding repairs over target, what are you doing about it, what's your mitigation, and when's it going to get done. So we had that to hand. We had those board minutes, those committee minutes to show that we'd done that, how we then linked with our housing teams, how we proactively engage with those residents, that we write to them to advise them their repairs are outside the target. We offer them, in line with the Housing Ombudsman, we preempt and we give them a voucher to say, we're sorry about that, this is when it's going to get done, or we don't know when it's going to get done, we've got materials issues, or we've got some other planning type of issue. Therefore, we will contact you again in X amount of weeks to tell you an update on your repair. So they like that proactiveness. The second bit they really drilled down to us was one of the KPIs that wasn't by agreeing on the compliance side was our fire risk actions. At the point of time when we had the regulator visit, we had about 50 fire risk actions that were outside the target. Again, exactly the same as repairs. They really, really wanted the detail. So they wanted to know what that action was, where it was, who'd picked it up, how long we'd known about it, why it was out of target, what we were doing about it, and where was the mitigations. Again, for us, we had done that piece of work, and it's something that our committees asked for in that sort of level of detail. So what we've been doing with the regulator, I guess, is we were really open and transparent about where our gaps were, and they liked that, and we said this is the plans that we've got to move forward. So just bring it to a close really. So on the reflections, I guess for us it was about where our gaps were. We were really open and transparent about that. We were able to share lessons learned. So one of the things the regulator really liked from us was we'd be able to go back, look at a complaint from 18 months, 24 months ago and say, this is what we told the resident was a lesson learned. This is how we chose a policy or the process. And this is how our satisfaction improved. So we'll be able to track them on that journey. Now, we were really pleased to come out of C1, obviously, as a business. But we were really clear that that doesn't mean we're great at everything that we do, and we still need to improve, and we know where our gaps are. And I guess the key for us to learn is be really open and transparent about where the gaps are in the business, and just share that with your board and your committees. So when they come in for an inspection, they can ask they can evidence where you've done that.